time for another podcast by George. Straight talk, straight from the heartland, that'll have you saying, "By George, I think he's got it." Now, here's George.
Hello, hi, how are you? Welcome on in to another podcast by George. Again, thank you for that outstanding introduction. That's John Schaefer, the big booming voice, a hockey teammate of mine. He's a creator, or he's here in Des Moines. If you want to look up John Schaefer, if you need anything done for the internet, anything digital that way, he's a good guy to contact. John Schaefer. Just love that intro. On guitar is Bob Pace with that little jingle that you hear. But anyway, we're going to be talking today about serious stuff. Again, we're going to be talking to our good friends, PETA. Amber Canavan is coming on podcast by George again. You've seen her on here before. The pork producers, all of these pig farmers, they call them, but they're not really farmers, folks. They call them pork producers. They're not really pork producers. They're killing pigs. They're killing them by the hundreds of thousands, overfeeding America, poisoning the world, really, particularly here in the heartland, our soil, our water. And these folks are now playing victim. They're going to get proactive. They're tired of being kicked around by activist groups like, I mean, honestly, that's the context. That's what we're going to be talking about on the show today. But I got a couple of housekeeping things that I wanted to bring up because I like to have fun on the show, but some of this stuff is depressing at times. And I couldn't really have a show today without getting to this. Let me bring this up on screen and read through this. This is from our good friends at Common Dreams, and it's about Julian Assange. Now, I don't know if you've caught this before or not, but we've talked about this a lot on the show. A chilling message to journalists the world over. The UK approves Assange extradition to the United States. Julian Assange's wife, Stella, slammed the UK government for moving to send the WikiLeaks publisher to the country that plotted his assassination. Yeah, that would be us. Yeah. Jake Johnson doing the reporting on this. And Common Dreams is a good place to go to get your news, folks. The UK government on Friday formally approved the extradition of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange to the United States to face espionage charges, a decision that human rights groups condemned as a dire threat to journalism worldwide. Assange, who has been detained in a high-security London prison since 2019, he was in the Ecuadorian embassy prior to that. He hasn't been a free man, folks, for about a decade. Well, he's expected to appeal the move by UK Home Secretary Priti Patel, whose office insisted that the publisher's extradition to the United States would not be incompatible with his human rights, including his right to a fair trial and to freedom of expression. What? Amnesty International's Agnes Callamard, who previously worked as a United Nations human rights expert, disagreed with Patel's assessment, warning that allowing Julian Assange to be extradited to the United States would put him at great risk and sends a chilling message to journalists the world over, large and small, folks. It should send chills down the spine of everyone from Podcast by George to the New York Times. If the extradition proceeds, Amnesty International is extremely concerned that Assange faces a high risk of prolonged solitary confinement, which would violate the prohibition on torture or other ill treatment. That's right. Solitary confinement over much of the world is considered to be torture, folks. Callamard said in a statement that diplomatic assurances provided by the U.S. that Assange will not be kept in solitary confinement cannot be taken on face value given previous history. Yeah, talking about the fact that the United States tends to lie about these things. We call on the UK to refrain from extraditing Julian Assange, for the U.S. to drop the charges, and for Assange to be freed, Callamard added. If found guilty of all 17 Espionage Act charges, which were originally brought by the Trump administration, Assange could face a 175-year prison sentence, which the U.S. has said that he could serve in his native Australia. Yeah, a prison's a prison, folks. A British judge had previously rejected U.S. attempts to secure Assange's extradition on the grounds that the country's prison system, that's ours, is so brutal that it would endanger the journalist's life. The Biden administration has continued pursuing the charges against Assange despite vocal warnings and pushback from human rights and press freedom groups. Stella Assange, the WikiLeaks founder's wife, warned Friday that the UK government has approved sending Julian Assange to the country that plotted his assassination. What? Yeah, remember that Michael Isikoff reporting in Yahoo News? We had that on Podcast by George, I don't know, 6 months ago, maybe a year or so ago. And it was all about these leaked memos, wires, cables, whatever, from Mike Pompeo, that pontificating gas bag that may run for president, believe it or not. They considered kidnapping or killing the journalist who published classified information that exposed U.S. war crimes. Yeah, that's Assange's. That's what they have got him there for. Not for lying, not for obfuscating, not for disinformation, nothing like that. Nothing to do with the Hillary Clinton campaign or anything like that. They've got him in prison for exposing war crimes, not the war criminals, but the guy that exposed them. In a statement responding to Patel's decision, WikiLeaks said that this is a dark day for press freedom and for British democracy. Anyone in this country who cares about freedom of expression should be deeply ashamed, the organization continued. Julian did nothing wrong. He has committed no crime and is not a criminal. He is a journalist and a publisher. He's won journalism awards worldwide, folks, and he's being punished for doing his job. Well, today is not the end of the fight, WikiLeaks added. It is only the beginning of a new legal battle. We will appeal through the legal system. The next appeal will be before the High Court. We will fight louder and harder on the streets. We will organize, and we will make Julian's story be known to all. And I'm doing my part, what little I can, folks, to share the word here about what's happening with Julian Assange. And I wanted to make sure that you were aware of that. It is a dark day indeed when it comes to journalism. Okay, so we live in a house of mirrors. You've heard me say that on the podcast before. Well, I want you to take a look at this. This is something I won't read through all of this. We've got our guest waiting. I want to get her on here very quickly. But this was out of Norfolk, Virginia. John Hinckley Jr., according to the Associated Press, who shot and wounded President Ronald Reagan in 1981, was freed from court oversight Wednesday, officially concluding decades of supervision by legal and mental health professionals. After 41 years, 2 months, and 15 days, freedom at last, he wrote on Twitter shortly after 12 p.m. The lifting of all restrictions. Now, this guy was not in prison, folks, which Julian Assange is. The lifting of all restrictions had been expected since late September. U.S. District Court Judge Paul Friedman in Washington had said he would free Hinckley on June 15th if he continued to remain mentally stable in the community in Virginia, where he has lived since 2016. Hinckley, who was acquitted by reason of insanity, spent the decades before that in a Washington mental hospital. Now, remember, Assange is in Belmarsh. He's in London. He's in solitary confinement. I mean, he's in some of the worst conditions that anybody can be in. There are murderers that don't, well, John Hinckley wasn't a murderer, but he shot the president, and he was never in a prison. He was never detained like Julian Assange is being. Freedom for Hinckley will include giving a concert. Get this. He plays guitar and sings in Brooklyn, New York, that's scheduled for July. Yeah, he's already gained nearly 30,000 followers on Twitter and YouTube in recent months as the judge loosened Hinckley's restrictions before lifting all of them. But the graying 67-year-old is far from being the household name that he became after shooting and wounding the 40th U.S. president and several others outside a Washington hotel. Today, historians say Hinckley is best a question on a quiz show and someone who unintentionally helped build the Reagan legend and inspire a push for stricter gun control. I want to continue with this because this is just a head shaker. This is the house of mirrors, folks. If Hinckley had succeeded in killing Reagan, then he would have been a pivotal historical figure. H.W. Brands, a historian and Reagan biographer, wrote in an email to the Associated Press, as it is, he is a misguided soul whom history has already forgotten. I ain't forgot him. Barbara Perry, a professor and director of presidential studies at the University of Virginia's Miller Center, said that Hinckley would be maybe a Jeopardy question, but his impact remains tangible in Reagan's legacy. Okay, now these highlights are mine. Follow along with this. Quote, for the president himself to have been so seriously wounded and to come back from that actually made Ronald Reagan the legend that he became. He's a legend, folks, like the movie hero that he was. Well, he ain't a legend to me. Reagan isn't. I put a lot of what's wrong with America today right at the footstep of Ronald Reagan, right at the doorstep of Ronald Reagan. That's where it kind of started. It's been accelerating ever since then, but it all began with him. And the dude was never a movie hero that I knew of. Now, he was from a different era. I didn't watch a lot of Ronald Reagan movies, but I tell people all the time, my God, he was a B movie actor. Reagan showed grace and humor in the face of death, Perry said. After being shot, the president told emergency room doctors that he hoped they were all Republicans. Yeah, like I said, this is where a lot of this crap started. He later joked to his wife, Nancy, that he was sorry he forgot to duck. When the president first spoke to Congress after the shooting, he looked just a little bit thinner, but he's still the robust cowboy that is Ronald Reagan, Perry said. Ronald Reagan ain't a cowboy, folks. He was never a cowboy. He was a broadcaster on WHO, my alma mater. I mean, he didn't know a horse's ass from a hole in the ground. I mean, he was not a cowboy, but people think of him that way. The assassination attempt paralyzed Reagan's press secretary, James Brady, who died in 2014. That Brady bill held back the proliferation of assault weapons for a number of years until it was rescinded. In 1993, President Bill Clinton signed into law that Brady bill, which required a 5-day waiting period for handgun purchases and background checks of prospective buyers. The Brady campaign to prevent gun violence and the Brady Center to prevent gun violence are named after Brady and his wife, Sarah. The shooting also injured Secret Service agent Timothy McCarthy and Washington police officer Thomas Delante. McCarthy told the AP last year they didn't have a lot of good Christian thoughts about Hinckley. Well, okay, there's some honesty, I guess. I don't blame him for that. Well, let me see if I can get this to come down off screen here. I want to get back so that we can get to our guest and exit out of this full screen image of that. Okay, and let's go back and bring me back up full screen. Okay. So here we go, and we're back, and we can bring in our guest, and it is here. Let's put this up on screen, Amber Canavan, and she's from PETA, and she's been waiting very patiently, and I thank her for that. And so let's click the right button here and say hello to Amber, and let's talk about some ethical treatment or non-ethical treatment of animals, as it were. Welcome back to the podcast, Amber.
Thanks for having me. And I just realized that the cat who's in my profile picture is currently joining us. So
I'm still going. Yeah. So how old is that? Is it a he?
He, General Bonkers.
How old's General Bonkers?
He's 14.
Ah, that's great. Yeah, I lost my cat. He was, I think, 16 years old. We got him from some folks that didn't know exactly how old he was. Well, let me bring this up on screen because this is what brought me to you and to PETA this time around. And again, I talked about the House of Mirrors, and this is part of it. This is out of the Des Moines Register from a week or so ago. The pork producer group saying it will be less reactive and more proactive in defending industry. A national pork producers group says it'll move more aggressively, addressing challenges to the industry, including controversial animal welfare requirements as part of a new strategic plan unveiled at the World Pork Expo in Des Moines this week. Now, that would have been last week, I think. This is going out around the world, Amber. A lot of people aren't aware. I mean, they must laugh, but yeah, this World Pork Expo is a big deal. This thing, Brian Humphrey, CEO of the National Pork Producers Council, said the group plans to be less reactive and more proactive on national and state issues, including trade, government policies, and animal rights initiatives. Those include the voter-approved Proposition 12 in California and Question 3 in Massachusetts, which require producers selling products in those states to meet expanded space requirements for pregnant sows, which are typically kept in space-restricted gestation stalls. Okay, well, we'll pick that up here in a little bit, but I want you to expand and talk about that a little bit. Even the writing of that is kind of a sterile treatment of this issue with these sows and these hogs. We're talking about horrific circumstances for these farrowing operations and these CAFOs and these large pork producers. Talk about that a little bit.
Right. Just the fact of calling not allowing someone to confine a pregnant animal in a way that they can't even stand up or turn around as being controversial
yes.
is a topic in itself, right? These are really basic protections that are trying to regulate something that never should have been invented in the first place. The industry should have never been allowed in the first place to confine animals in such cramped, filthy, and horrendous conditions as they are allowed to in the pork industry. And just to be clear, we're talking about pregnant animals who are kept in cages, basically the size of their body, to purposefully prevent them from being able to stand up or turn around. And the industry is throwing a big tantrum about not being allowed to do that anymore if they want to sell to certain markets. And just to be clear, PETA was one of the few groups that actually did originally oppose this legislation for not being comprehensive enough. This is really basic stuff that shouldn't be done to animals in the first place. And if we really want to break ground for animals, we need to be passing much, much stronger legislation. But even that is too much and a huge threat to the industry. So if they're upset over this one measly requirement just to let these animals stand up and turn around while they're pregnant, imagine what else they're doing. And undercover investigations that PETA's conducted have found everything from routine mutilations in the pork industry. They will literally chop the tails off of baby piglets, clip their teeth, notch their ears, all without pain relief. That's standard industry practice that every pig who gets turned into that bacon and pork chop on the grocery store shelf has been subjected to. And that legislation doesn't even touch any of that that's going on.
These gestation stalls and all of this talk about these CAFOs and these large operations. Now, when I was a kid, there wasn't much, if any, of that. I had no knowledge of that at all. Farmers were small. They had smaller operations. They might have, some hogs. They might have a few dozen or something like that. But I was, pretty much unaware of it. And people have heard me talk on the show before about how shocked and appalled by what you're describing. That I've seen, and I can't even you can't look at you literally can't look at the videos. Even the photos are tough, but I wanted to bring this up on screen and read through this very quickly because this is from PETA and this is how they describe it. And I thought this was very enlightening and people should be aware of this. Considered by animal behaviorists to be smarter than dogs, pigs are clever animals who are also friendly, loyal, and intelligent. Now, I can attest to that because I raised them as a kid. I mean, every farm boy that had a 4-H animal they're smart. We talked about your cat there, and smart is relative, but they're close to human intelligence. They really are. You can't just look at this and say, oh, hell, they're just pigs. They're every bit as human as your dog or your cat. They're naturally very clean. They avoid soiling their living areas. People are unaware of that. They think of hogs as filthy animals because, they when it gets hot, they got to be in the mud to be cool, so they think of them as filthy, but they're really not. When they're not confined on factory farms, pigs spend hours playing, lying in the sun. I've seen them do it, and exploring their surroundings with their powerful sense of smell. On modern farms, these outgoing, sensitive animals spend their entire lives in cramped, filthy warehouses under the constant stress of intense confinement and are denied everything that is natural and important to them. And God, we pride ourselves in being humane and human beings and so smart. Look what we do. Mother pigs, sows, spend most of their miserable lives in tiny gestation and farrowing crates, so small they can't even turn around. That's what Amber was talking about. They are impregnated again and again until their bodies give out and they're sent to slaughter. And Amber, I've changed even my nomenclature, and you folks must fight this all the time at PETA because, we talk about packing plants. And I had relatives that worked in the packing plant. They're slaughtering houses, and they're not. They're ugly. It's a horrible thing. I'm not calling them packing plants anymore, Amber. I'm calling them what they are. They're slaughterhouses.
Yeah, absolutely. We call it a slaughterhouse. You try to sanitize it by calling it a processing facility or something like that.
Yeah.
And we do. We want people to understand what is going on behind those closed doors that are often in um, far out places, because they know that once people see behind that veil, and actually see those standard industry practices that they're defending, attempting to defend so mightily, that when the public knows about that, they're rightfully upset. And that's why we're increasingly seeing people just stopping buying these products, going vegan. That's the one of the best daily ways that you can spare these animals. Each person who goes vegan can spare about 200 animals every single year, just by not paying people to keep those slaughterhouses running, to keep those factory farms in business, and instead support all these other businesses that are producing healthy plant-based foods, and producing livelihoods for people, and ways to use their land that aren't polluting it and aren't harming animals. And I was going back to the individuality of pigs. Absolutely, they are complex social beings. I would say maybe they even invented sunscreen before humans did, so
Yeah.
that's probably giving them credit for something, right?
Yeah.
And they'll even enjoy video games. They enjoy video games just like humans do. They can manipulate a joystick with their noses. Uh, the more and more you look at animals, they have so much more in common with us. And those differences of any that do exist are really irrelevant to the way that we are exploiting them and treating them like objects when they absolutely are not.
Well, folks have heard me talk about it on the show before. I'm not going to go in depth into it, but we raised these hogs, and then it came time. My dad told me we had to take them to the packing plant, and I was just a young boy, and it was my job to herd them up the loading ramp to get into the stock truck to take them to the slaughterhouse, and the hogs wouldn't do it. I mean, I swear they knew what was going on. I mean, they definitely knew that there was nothing good happening there, particularly when they were dropped into the trucks, and it's just something that I'll never forget. And I wanted to bring this on screen because people say, "Well, how do I go vegan?" Well, PETA's made it easy. They got a starter kit, Amber.
Absolutely. Sorry, my voice is going out there a little bit. Yes, PETA.org. We will send anybody who wants one a free vegan starter guide. And then our website has hundreds and hundreds of recipes. Our YouTube has recipe videos, super simple things if you're not quite sure how to get started, simple swaps. I think last time I was on, I talked a little bit about vegan baking swaps. Everything you could, every taste and flavor and type of dish, there's a way to veganize it. And if there's not one yet, invent one, because people are really getting creative with things. Aquafaba was even just invented a couple of years ago. If you have you heard of aquafaba?
No, I haven't. No.
It is it is the this might sound a little odd, but it's the juice from the can of chickpeas. But it's very versatile and acts like eggs in many ways because of the proteins from the chickpeas in there. So you can make, people have been making, using it as an egg replacer. You can make whipped cream with it, fancy little confections and things like that. And I mean, it just hadn't been invented yet because
No.
people haven't been working with these products enough. And it's such an exciting space. If you're a foodie, that people are finding more and more ways to create everything and even more stuff that we haven't even imagined. So instead of eating the same 4 or 5 animals every day, there's so much out there. Tofu is like one of the most versatile foods in the country, and or in the in the world. And there's U.S. grown tofu. We can support U.S. Soybean farmers, locally
Yeah.
produced, and it's delicious
Well, it
if
can
you
be
make it
produced
right.
a number of ways. I like Thai food, and tofu is a big component of that. And We just don't need to eat the quantity of particular, like you say, every single day. My God, I go to the grocery store. I'm looking at people that can't even stand upright to push their carts. I'm looking at these little motorized scooters with people that can't even walk, and they're going in there to get these. They're killing animals to get like that. I don't want to be a part of that. And for anybody that's gone down the interstate and gone by one of these stock trucks and you see the noses sticking out of the trucks, I mean, if that doesn't make you think, I mean, honest to God, I'm telling you, I think they know where they're going. I mean, you can put an end to this by going vegan. And there's what is there kind of a rule of thumb that if you go vegan, you could save 100 animals, or what's the math on that?
Nearly 200 a year land
What?
animals. That doesn't even count. I mean, there's uncountable trillions of aquatic animals who are pulled out of the ocean every year. The government doesn't even track them as individuals. They just track them by the pound. So no one really knows, but it's in the trillions. And those animals are every bit as sentient and feel pain as we do. They just look a lot different than us. So there's these very tough misconceptions out there that they don't think or feel. But fish are not swimming vegetables. They evolved and have to survive in a very tough environment, just like we do. And they also deserve our consideration.
Yeah.
There's also so many great vegan foods that are coming, from the ocean as well. There's new product, vegan bacon product that's made partially from seaweed that just came on the market. So again, people are getting really creative, and you can get all that taste, all that flavor, all that texture without harming animals. And as you said, it's better for your health. So many people think they're eating less meat, but the way that the meat industry has manipulated the public into being so obsessed with protein, and you see all those advertisements for McDonald's, and meat is always at the center of those meals for a lot of these companies. Luckily, we're seeing that change. We're seeing a lot of chain restaurants down to individual restaurants having, it's odd if someplace doesn't have a vegan option these days.
That's
They know
cool.
they're leaving money on the table if they don't have that option, because, I mean, every family at least has somebody who's vegetarian or vegan at this point. And if those people can't have anything, the whole family is going to go somewhere else. So if they don't have a vegan option, they're going to be left in the dust, is what we're seeing.
Well, let's say you don't have any empathy for animals. Let's say you don't have any sensitivity. Let's say you don't have pets. Let's say you're a Hannibal Lecter that just likes to slaughter and eat animals, and you think it tastes good and you want to do it. But let's say that you want to survive in 10, 15, 20 years. There are climate activists, not animal activists, climate activists that are telling us that the largest contributor to the methane gas that is killing us all in the atmosphere and leading to this climate catastrophe is because of this massive animal agriculture growth that's going on around the country. It may be the number one factor. So do it for that reason, if none other.
Right. Factory farms, animal agriculture. I mean, it is a huge contributor. Even before the droughts and the wildfire and the climate catastrophe were, making the news. I mean, it is basically a giant open sewer. These pigs on the factory farms, they're living suspended over basically a pit of their own waste. And in places in Iowa, North Carolina,
Right.
people who live around these
Right where we
facilities
are.
have tried suing, because they're getting asthma. They're getting all sorts of diseases, respiratory diseases, because they spray this waste on the fields and it oversaturates. It gets in the air, gets in people's lungs, gets all over their laundry. It's harming people in these communities where this stuff is produced. And then it goes on the supermarket shelves and people consume it. And, it puts you at higher risk of America's top killers are still heart disease, cancer, diabetes, stroke, processed meat like bacon. The World Health Organization did confirm that it definitely is a cause of cancer. It's a known human carcinogen, and it's being propped up by taxpayers.
Yes.
Last time I was on, we were talking about,
Yeah.
some of the bailouts and things that the meat industry, slaughterhouses were some of the biggest hotspots for COVID-19 outbreaks because of the way that they are, the workers are packed in close together, hot, fast, dangerous conditions, perfect for a virus to spread among workers. The US government is finally starting to crack down and fine them for the dangerous working conditions they created during the pandemic. It's a slap on the wrist. These are multi-million-dollar companies that are getting tens of thousands of dollars fines. It's really just the cost of doing business for them. And meanwhile, they got all these they got an executive order saying that they could stay open during the height of the pandemic when all the other businesses had to shut down.
Yep.
For citing fake food shortages. It wasn't a food shortage. We don't need meat. We had so much other food we could have consumed.
We covered that on our podcast. That executive order that Amber is referring to that was issued by Donald Trump was written by Tyson Foods. I mean, that's, again, talking about Julian Assange earlier. That's from some whistleblower. That's from some leak. This memorandum was shown to have been written by Tyson, the employer of the workers that were going on the line in the pandemic and getting sick to keep this food flying by. And there was never a shortage. It was nothing but propaganda. Well, I want to go back to this article here because I want Amber to comment on this. Let me see if I can get this to come back on. Okay, so this is the part about them getting more aggressive and talking about the situation in California. Are you watching that closely, Amber? Because California's kind of taken the lead on this, and they've raised the ire of the pork producers here in Iowa because they want to have some of these restrictions in place. Now, I know you probably think it's not enough, but maybe it's a starting point out there in California.
Well, I mean, I think it really, the fight with this just really shows how much the meat industry has gotten away with, how powerful their lobby is, that for this tiny, tiny concession to just let these animals turn around, that they're throwing such a tantrum and that they're able to mount such, legal defense, how much they're spending on lawyers and putting pressure on lawmakers to try to attack this instead of updating their industry from, they're finally facing some accountability, some very, very belated bare minimum of accountability for their industry. Going back to what I was mentioning earlier with people who live around factory farms and slaughterhouses, trying to sue for the water pollution and the negative health impacts of living near these factory farms. People are getting harmed by the meat, dairy, and egg industry, and they have, no protections. Instead, the lobby, the meat, dairy, and egg lobby, is basically stomping all over people's rights. Obviously, they're stomping over animals' rights every single day.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, they're receiving federal disaster relief funding every time they fail to prepare for a hurricane or for bird flu or for the COVID-related shortages. The government has been giving massive payouts every time they have to leave a flock of birds to drown in a hurricane. They get paid out for leaving them there. It's absolutely backwards.
That's us. I mean, we say government, folk. That's we're funding that. I mean, that's where that money is coming from. And this is from the government, which, by the way, did not provide health insurance, didn't provide Medicare to as many as 1 million U.S. citizens that died because of COVID. They say 300,000 of those deaths might have been prevented if we'd had Medicare for all in this country. Now, we've talked about that before on the show. I don't want to get into that today, but I did want to continue with this article because it's Amber's world. To put it bluntly, producers need the freedom to run their own businesses, Yeah, Amber, they want to, but except when they need that government assistance to our industry's high standards and nobody else's, said Humphreys during a news conference at the Iowa State Fairground, where the Pork Expo is being held through Friday. Iowa is the nation's largest pork producer. Now, the scale of this is what gets me every time I dig a little deeper into this, Amber. We raise about 50 million pigs annually in the state of Iowa. We have more hogs by far in this state than we do people. And the expo is expected to attract about 10,000 attendees. What are they going there for? Well, they're writing it off. I mean, that's, again, something that we're all paying for. The Pork Producers Council, the expo's organizer, has been a terrific defender of the industry, Humphrey said in an interview. For example, the group filed a legal challenge to Proposition 12, along with the American Farm Bureau Federation, and an appeal is before the U.S. Supreme Court. But Humphrey said the group can do more to help food service companies, retailers, legislators, and regulators understand how farms actually work today. Now, that's laughable, Amber, and not in a funny way, but in a weird way. They're actually doing everything they can to prevent everyone from knowing how these farms actually work. They won't let video cameras in. They won't let cameras in. They won't let reporters in. There's an ag-gag law in the state of Iowa. They say they want to do this to let everybody know how the farms actually work. No, they don't.
No. Yes, it's absolutely double-sided, right?
It's a house of mirrors. I mean, it really is. I mean, I tell people that could be the subtitle for my YouTube show. Okay, let me continue with this here because we're running out of time, and I started off talking about Julian Assange, and we got Amber on hold here. So, as an example of the types of corporate challenges the industry faces, he pointed to billionaire Carl Icahn's efforts this spring to get to two animal rights activists onto the McDonald's board of directors. Now, I wasn't aware of this, and in April, it released a letter saying the fast food chain had failed to meet its 10-year goal to eliminate gestation stalls for pregnant sows by this year. By failing to take swift and meaningful action on the issue, McDonald's top management and board are patting themselves on the back while condoning cruelty. This guy wrote, Humphrey said producers don't need billionaire investors that don't really understand our industry trying to push changes. And again, this is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Here's this house of mirrors that we're talking about, Amber. I mean, they're criticizing a billionaire investor, but they're all over the place in this pork industry, adding that the National Pork Council is talking with corporations like McDonald's about animal welfare issues, including the industry standards for animal care. I love this photo over here to the right because that's what we're talking about, folks. That's what you're eating. That look great. Okay, so I don't know if there was anything else in this article I really want. Anything that you can add about the situation with the McDonald's other than what I already mentioned, Amber?
Well, PETA is actually a shareholder of McDonald's as well. We were at that shareholder meeting, actually pushing them to make good on their test of the Beyond Burger. PETA's been, campaigning and pressuring McDonald's to get better practices for a couple of decades at this point. And, even their fries aren't vegetarian. They contain beef tallow.
I heard that, yeah.
But at the very least, they were testing, finally, they were testing the Beyond Burger a couple months ago, just in California and Texas. And, for all of their competitors that have been coming out with vegan burgers, Carl's Jr. has it on the menu. A bunch of their other competitors have vegan burgers. It's like I said, a company that doesn't have a vegan option is really missing out on that market, right? McDonald's is one of the biggest, and for such a pathetic, honestly, launch testing this burger in just a couple of small areas in the country. It was very disappointing, to say the least, so much so that PETA actually ended up stepping in. We handed out nearly 10,000 burgers, and people loved them. They were so excited to try them. They didn't know about it because we don't know, but McDonald's wasn't quite doing its job, really purposefully and intentionally launching this.
Yeah.
So PETA did attend that shareholder meeting, kind of asking, when are you going to make this permanent? Because we'd certainly like to have to stop attending McDonald's shareholder meetings. And having that vegan option, when it's there, people will choose it. And such a large company having that on the menu increases the accessibility and ease for people. I mean, I've been there. I've been in a small town, and I'm like, thank goodness, there's a Carl's Jr. or at least a Taco Bell where I can get a bean burrito. Because sometimes the small local restaurants aren't going to really have something, and it increases that accessibility for people. So our goal is for McDonald's to at least have that vegan option. And, we're going to keep doing our jobs like we've been doing. I mean, a couple of years ago, you could never imagine that McDonald's or big companies like that would have a vegan burger. You'd never imagine finding a vegan restaurant in a small town or city. That was only if you went to like New York City or something. And now they're everywhere, and they're thriving in rural communities as well, where you never would have thought they would.
Well, try it. You'll like it. Even here in the heartland in Iowa, I mean, Burger King is offering one of those. There's a couple of things about those burgers, those vegan burgers. They don't have the grease. They don't. If you're somebody that suffers from reflux, as an example, you're going to like these a lot better because you're not going to have the issue with them that you have, with the traditional hamburgers that are fried in grease. For me personally,
health food, but they're tasty.
I do something. There's a Beyond Sausage, and they have these Italian sausage flavored Beyond Sausage links. Now you put those on the grill and you grill them, and I mean, honest to God, you can't tell the difference, but because Italian sausage, what you're getting is the Italian sausage flavoring. And I eat those, and I can't tell the difference. I think it's great, and I'll tell you what, when I think about the animal that I'm saving, the little hog snout that isn't going to be slaughtered in the slaughtering house because I'm doing this. I mean, I don't know. It makes me feel good. I don't know about other people. Well, I wanted to, before we leave Amber here today, I wanted to bring this up on screen because we talk about PETA and PETA's efforts against this pork producer industry. And look at this chart. Now, this is the annual U.S. pork production. That's pigs, folks. Again, this nomenclature thing that we're dealing with. This is from 1930 on the bottom left of the chart, and this is until 2027. The projected billions of pounds of pigs in this country, and I mean, it's going off the chart almost literally here visually. So I don't know. You talk about PETA and these animal activist organizations, Amber, and I think it's pretty clear who's the David and who's the Goliath here. You've got those pork producers with all of that money and all of that government support. And you got groups on the other side like PETA trying to do what they can to rein this in for our health, for our water, for our air, and for the climate.
Yeah, it's definitely got a fight on our hands. It can be a bit discouraging sometimes when you're just thinking about, that slaughterhouse is just operating all day, every day, killing animals. But we have made so many strides, and the fact that the pork industry is freaking out about things as simple as having to let a pig turn around really shows the power of people speaking up and taking that initiative. And, one of PETA's mottos is never be silent. So especially people that are, kind of in that heart of darkness, living in Iowa and places where these industries seem so strong and so everywhere, and just showing that even people who live in rural areas and farming communities don't support this stuff either, can be really, really powerful.
Well, and before we leave here, and I'm oftentimes accused of this on this show, Amber, people will say, well, okay, that's good. You've pointed out a lot of problems. You've done a lot of bitching and complaining and pissing and moaning. But what do we do? Well, the number one thing you can do is go vegan. Now, well, what about you, George? Well, at the beginning of the pandemic, instead of sitting and overeating and gaining weight, killing animals that don't need to be killed, I went hardline vegetarian. I'm borderline vegan, Amber. I still have a pizza once or a few times a year anyway that has cheese on it. I know that's part of the puzzle, but I wanted to bring this up on screen also to show people what they can do, because this is, again, right out of the heartland. Now, this is a news release that I just got, a media advisory. This is from Food and Water Watch. It says experts to join farmers, advocates, and legislators for a people's hearing on the urgent need for factory farm moratorium in Iowa. They're still pushing for that. There's still a possibility of this. Speakers are to testify on water quality, public health, market consolidation, and effects on farmers, agriculture, and rural communities. Dateline Ames, Iowa, on Saturday. That's tomorrow when Amber and I are appearing on this show. Farmers, experts, advocates, and legislators will hold a people's hearing on the urgent need for a factory farm moratorium in Iowa. They're just saying hit the pause button, folks, until we can figure out what the hell to do next, because we've ruined the rivers and streams already. I mean, you can't even step in them, let alone use the water for anything until it's been run through some kind of an artificial purification system. And it's also in the groundwater. There are shallow wells in this state that are 25 feet deep that are poisoned basically by this stuff. So this people's hearing comes on the heels of yet another legislative session without action in Des Moines. Guess why, folks? On the state's factory farm crisis, and 1 month after the release of a new Food and Water Watch report, the Hog Bosses, detailing the agricultural consolidation crisis in Iowa's farm country. Absent legislative action on the issue, advocates from the Iowa Alliance for Responsible Agriculture, that's a coalition of more than 25 organizations united against factory farming in Iowa, and I've had those folks on my show before. They're hosting the 2-hour people's hearing to present constituent demands and expert perspectives on the necessity of a farm moratorium here in Iowa. So I don't know, Amber, you would have to agree. I mean, obviously we would like a cessation, you would like a halt, but a moratorium, any day that there's a halt on a new CAFO is a good day as far as PETA is concerned, I would think.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that sounds like a great action for people who are local.
Yeah, and I put the address up here for people that want to attend this. It's inside the Story County Conservation Center. That's located at 56461 180th Street, Ames, Iowa. And I would just refer people to the Food and Water Watch website if you want to look into that a little bit more. Well, Amber, you've been very kind, very gracious with your time to kind of hang in here today as I went through some of these issues, starting off with Julian Assange, even talking about John Hinckley's release. I got to cover the news too on Podcast by George, but I'm going to do this. I'm going to give you the last word here. I want you to take as long as you would like to kind of wrap this up, this Podcast by George live line, and give us the news and views from PETA's perspective.
Well, 4th of July is coming up. So I just wanted to mention, you're mentioning those Beyond sausages. PETA's got some great info on our website, PETA.org. All those grillable items, the vegan mayos you can put in your coleslaw or your mac salads and things like that. You can really have those traditional 4th of July and all those types of foods just veganified. And yes, whenever we have an investigation of a factory farm break, or there's, legislation we're supporting, like the Research Modernization Bill, which is to help, it's a federal bill to stop the funding of animal experimentation. We have all that information on our website, and aside from going vegan, which you absolutely should, and that's one of those baseline things you can be doing every day for animals. The animals desperately need us to be active, and go to our website, go to our Action Center page, look at our action alerts, sign some of our action alerts, sign up for our action team if you want to get involved locally. We're always looking for people who want to organize either a protest or a tabling event, or just have leaflets about a certain issue, get it into your libraries. All those ideas, we have staff who are dedicated to getting people active, feeling confident in their activism, and making that change that the animals really desperately need.
Yeah, they need us. Like I say, help the animals, help yourself, help humanity, let alone the animals, because it's all going to end with this climate catastrophe if we don't rein this in. And the water that we drink, the air that we breathe. I mean, it's all interrelated, and it all comes back to this hideous practice that we've brought forth from the dark ages almost, which is unnecessary. We just don't need to do it anymore. And I love to have the folks from PETA on Podcast by George to talk about exactly that. Amber Canneman, thanks very much always for coming on Podcast by George.
Thanks so much for having me.
And folks, if you like the Podcast by George live lines that we have on with folks like Amber Canneman, you can subscribe to the PBG. Make sure you don't miss a single episode on Facebook or YouTube. That's where the videos are. That's where the live streams appear. And you can sign up for those on Facebook, on YouTube, or you can go to podcastbygeorge.com. Click on a badge or an icon where you would like to be notified when the live streams are releasing, and you'll never miss a single one. You can also subscribe and get the rebroadcast, the audio versions that appear on iTunes and Spotify and the iHeartRadio app and Stitcher and Deezer and Amazon and all kinds of places like that. Just go to podcastbygeorge.com and sign up just about anywhere where podcasts are seen or heard. But that's going to do it. That's going to wrap it up. That's all there is. And there ain't no more, folks. That's another podcast by George.